Well, hello there. Hope you're doing okay today. Hope you've been out taking some good pictures, some good video. Whatever it is, hope you're doing good and hope you're having a good time at it. That's what it's all about, just having some fun. Today, I thought I would tackle a subject that everybody seems to be afraid of, is manual mode. If you're a new photographer, a fairly new photographer, you may be scared to death of manual mode, not understanding what's going on in manual mode, but it's really simple. Okay? It's not rocket science, especially if you've been learning how to take good pictures, in shutter priority or aperture priority. When I started out just taking everything in aperture priority, because I knew if I had my ISO on auto, it was going to control everything 90% of the time like I wanted it. So the aperture, if I'm going to shoot portraits, I worry about what's between f2.8 and f4 usually. That's what I like as a professional portrait photographer. That's where I usually shoot. I seldom shoot wide open because I want more detail in my portraits. Same way if you're outside and you're walking around the park shooting birds and rabbits and flowers, f8 or f10 is probably what you're going to be shooting at. And when you're in aperture priority mode, like I said, the camera's going to take care of the shutter speed, but you need to pay attention to your good photos, the photos you like the best, and did you shoot them on f8 or f10, the ISO, you had it in auto ISO, if it looked good, all right, it's a win-win. So the shutter speed, look and see what the shutter speed was on those days and on those best pictures, and it kind of gives you a place to start. Okay? And shutter speed, there's nothing to it. Shutter speed and aperture both control everything about photography is light. It's how do I control the light? Okay? It's really not a problem. All right? So here we go. When you're shooting in aperture priority mode, if you shot a photo, oh man, that's just a little bit dark. Well, you can take that exposure compensation and you can bump it up a couple clicks and get a little bit brighter photo. You don't have to try, if you're in auto ISO, there's nothing to adjust. You could go into manual and bump it up, but you don't need to. You could change your f-stop a little bit and get a brighter photo, but it's just easier. You can control it with your shutter speed. So it's all about control of light. If you're taking really, really good photos in aperture priority, you're probably all ready to go to manual mode and not have any problems, because you carry over that stuff that you've learned from aperture priority, put it into manual mode, and go for it. Not really go for it educated. Alright? Now, one thing I'll tell you about any mode that you are in, I would suggest making sure your histogram is activated, because a lot of times when you shoot outside, you're sitting there chimping, you're looking at the photo and seeing if your exposure is okay. Well, if you activate your histogram, you're automatically going to have an idea about your exposure. If that I'll show you a picture here real quick. Let's take one. Here's a picture I took of a robin. And if you look, my little histogram is right in the middle. That's supposed to be a perfect exposure when it's dead on in the center. Sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But usually it's pretty much right on. Okay? Now I recommend on the histogram often is I shoot a little bit to the left. I shoot a little bit to the dark side, especially, with my portrait photography, or really any of it, because when you go to edit, it's easier to edit. It's easier to lighten the photo than it is to darken it. You can get some really ugly crap when you go darkening things. So I would always shoot slightly to the left, slightly underexposed, and it gives me room in editing. So there's a tip for you right there. The manual mode, guys, Let's take right now, if you got your camera in your hand, you can flip over to manual mode. And are you shooting a portrait? Are you outside? Are you going to be shooting rabbits? Or what are you taking a picture of? And then you can decide on your f-stop. If you're outside, let's stick it on f8 right now. If you're looking at me, put that camera on f8. All right. Then look back in here again. Look at this thing. Look at your meter. You got a little meter down here. It's telling you if you're under or over exposed. Okay. If that little meter, if it shows it's going off to the right, and you had your camera on 1/25th of a second, well, bump it up to 1/200th of a second and see where that meter is now. If you're shooting, and if it brings everything into the middle, you're going the right direction. See, it's really not that hard. Your camera's going to help you. Your camera's going to tell you really anything you need to know. But decide, like I say, are you shooting a person or you're outside shooting nature or whatever. But look through there, all right, and like right here, I'm looking at 1/100th of a second, f4, and my meter is dead center. And on my, let's say my auto ISO, inside here, my auto ISO is really high, but I'm shooting the right exposure. All right, so that's what you got to do. It's not that hard, and don't be afraid of it. And after a while, when you start shooting these portraits or you're outside shooting a lot, you're going to automatically do this without even thinking. So do not be afraid of manual mode at all, but be aware of your photography, and that's going to give you a good place to start. Pay attention to all those pictures that you've done before that you liked and turned out real good, and just look at those shutter speeds. The one thing I'll tell you about ISO real fast before we get out of this video, if you are shooting indoors or you're shooting in the perfect outdoor light, for an hour or two, you can go to manual ISO and you can really fine tune your ISO to just really perfect, perfect photos. It's all got to deal with controllable or uncontrollable. If you are inside in an exact lighting, or you're outside, and you got a really good, the lighting seems to be really perfect, you can put it in manual ISO and put it wherever you want it. That's controllable. Uncontrollable is if you're on a portrait shoot, outside, or you're just walking around the parks and you're going from, shadow to light, the subject's near, the subject's far. All these things go into uncontrollable. And that's where you need to be in auto ISO. It's not rocket science. Just think of it like that. Am I in control of the situation, or is Mother Nature in control of the situation? And just put it on that ISO. 90% of the time you'll be in auto, and your camera will do a heck of a job. So that leaves you just worrying about aperture and shutter speed. And if you watch that meter, it's going to be no problem whatsoever. You can do it. Go out there today, right now, after watching this video, and play with it a little bit. Don't be afraid. When you bump over to that M, boom, it'll happen for you. I promise it'll happen for you. Just don't think too much about it. Just look at your meter, adjust, and when you take that shot out there, if the histogram says it's good, trust it. Because a lot of times you can't see this very good, especially outside. But when you take that picture and you look at the histogram, you can usually see that graph, and it'll tell you what you have done or done right. And just like right here, you can say I shot way dark, and you just adjust it accordingly. No big deal. So go out there right now today, start shooting manual mode, all right? And we'll talk to you soon. Be strong. Be unafraid. Talk to you later. Bye-bye. Boom.